In a time of rising unrest, when borders dominate headlines and immigration policy shapes the future of our nation, the truth matters. From the front lines of law enforcement, national security, and public policy, this is Frontline Facts, where rhetoric is stripped away, where politics takes a back seat, and where facts, hard, documented facts, lead the conversation. As instability grows beyond our southern border, as communities feel the impact at home, we bring you informed voices. Attorneys, senior law enforcement leaders, policy experts, and professionals who understand the law, the protocols, and the consequences. This isn't opinion. This isn't spin. This is clarity in a time of confusion. This is Frontline Facts, and the conversation starts now.
Welcome to Frontline Facts with Luisa Deason, where we correct the rhetoric on immigration issues and public policy. Today, we're diving into the importance of trades with key countries, specifically Texas and Mexico. And I have a gentleman here who is not a novice in his expertise in his field of business. In fact, not only did he run for Congress in CD 38, but he's an author and, of course, the former president of the American Society of Mexico and a Rice University top graduate. Larry Rubin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Luisa. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. So one of the things that I want to go ahead and just kind of dive into is, people don't really know how you got started in this field and why you're so passionate. I know as well as you that, we're Mexican American, so we have a true passion about our culture and our countries and thriving, but trade is your key element. How did you get to where you are and how did you get started?
Sure thing. So originally, where I began to get very involved in trade was when I started working for American Airlines, and before I became the managing director of the airline and responsible for Mexico. That's where it began, because we had obviously cargo operations and had to do a lot with trade between Mexico and our destinations, and that was really the beginning. And it was basically when NAFTA was at its height, back in the late 90s. And I started to see that trade had an impact on both of our countries, right? In Mexico and the United States. And eventually, I got very involved with the Chamber of Commerce, with the American Chamber of Commerce. And when American Airlines went through a second Chapter 11, I decided to leave the airline world and go to something with more a steadier, let's say. And that's when I became the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce. And of course, in that role, I had direct contact with policymakers in both sides in both sides of the border, right? And also a lot of contact with Washington D.C. And that's where it began, basically after 1997. And throughout the years, I was able to work very closely with key decision makers, not only in the business world, but also in politics, to make sure that trade between our two countries thrived, and integrating those very complex supply chains between our two countries. And Texas obviously played and plays a key role in trade between Mexico and the United States. Today, Texas is the largest trading partner in the USMCA. It basically represents 1/3 of the total trade relationship between our two countries, and that trade, which is close to $300 billion worth of trade, really makes Texas the most significant player in the bilateral relationship. The total relationship is accounts for about close to $1 trillion, but you could imagine that one out of 50 states representing 1/3 of it, which is Texas, is really extraordinary. So that part in itself is extremely important. And then a few years ago, I was invited to the American Society, And the American Society was founded in 1942 by President Harry Truman and his ambassador to Mexico. And it was founded on the belief that we needed in Mexico an organization run by the private sector, which represented three key pillars. One pillar would be representing U.S. business, and basically today it accounts for close to 20,000 corporations operating in Mexico, U.S. corporations operating in Mexico. The other pillar, 157 nonprofit organizations that span cultural, educational, and civic organizations and religious organizations, American organizations that are represented here in Mexico. And the third pillar, last but not least, is the 2 million Americans living in Mexico today. And that is what the American Society represents. Our honorary chairman is the United States ambassador to Mexico and has always been since 1942. And I serve as the chairman of the board, and in that capacity, naturally, I'm involved in the strategic decisions of the organization and making sure it's going in the right direction and serving the purpose that it was founded for, which is bringing together our two countries, not only in trade, but in every single aspect, including collaboration between our two countries and more with national security and issues of that sort. So that in a nutshell, Lisa, is how I got involved in the trade relationship.
Well, that's pretty impressive. And of course, my background is I was actually born and raised in Mexico City. I have an American mother, a Mexican father who passed away almost 10 years ago. But he brought, my mother actually petitioned for all of us, and we got to the United States when I was 12. I'm not going to tell you how old I am because then I'm dating you and telling you how old I really am, and I won't disclose that. Got a few more wrinkles today. But it's impressive to understand the dynamics between both countries. And we know that years back, the importance of, NAFTA didn't work. NAFTA was not in the favor of the United States. It really was a failure, not of epic proportions, but describe that. Because one of the things that really impressed me was to listen to you speak at the Texas Public Summit. I was there. I do quite a few things for them as far as the immigration side of things, since my background is a former television reporter in the Hispanic market, and having been blonde hair and blue eye, people are amazed at the fact that I speak Spanish as well as I do. But then I became a spokesperson for not only the U.S. Immigration Service, which was abolished after 9/11, but then DHS and ICE. And so the fact that we are a state that does a lot of trade and has such good connections and ties to Mexico. Talk a little bit about that. You and I have the same passion. You're a Mexican American, so am I. We love our culture.
Definitely, and today the population of the total U.S. population, roughly 12% of the U.S. population is of Mexican American descent, right? And it's a staggering number, close to 40 million Mexican Americans living in the United States, representing 8% of the total U.S. GDP, which is huge. And not only that, but if the Mexican American community would be considered a country in terms of economic projections, it'd be bigger than France, right? So definitely this community is a community where you have a lot of diversity in terms of income distribution and what have you. But at the end of the day, it's a community that spends a lot, that invests a lot in the United States, and works in the United States, and obviously are American citizens. So for me and similar to you, it's been a passion to really let people know how important this community is. And we're not talking about immigrants, right? We're talking about full-fledged citizens that mostly have been born in the United States and have and pay taxes in the US, have homes in the United States, their businesses are there. And so it's an integral part of our society, although underrepresented in many different areas of our community, including underrepresentation in boardrooms, underrepresentation in CEOs, so there's not enough. It should be 12% of the total CEO pool would be Mexican American, and that number is not nearly as close. And naturally in politics, I mean, Congress has very few Mexican Americans in both houses and in the administration as well. So really, it's a community that, even though it's large and it's powerful, economically powerful in the United States, it doesn't have the sway or doesn't have the voice that it could have if it be a united front and really have more leaders involved in the different parts of our society.
Well, and I agree with you. The Mexican American that lives here in the United States that wants to run, that's a citizen that runs for Congress or a position of power, is greatly underrepresented. Let me do a little bit of a pivot and go back to the business aspect. I understand that there's binational agreements in business trades with Mexico and Texas and the United States. We had them having worked for immigration, notification type things with the Mexican government and the consulates here. But tell me a little bit about what are the key binational agreements currently in place between Mexico and Texas in the business environment.
Most of the agreements have to do with federal agreements that the United States signs with Mexico. At the end of the day, it all passes through Texas, or mostly through Texas. Texas represents 75% of the United States-Mexico border, which people don't realize, and the other 25% is California, New Mexico, Arizona, right? So mostly the U.S. Mexico border is Texas. So Texas represents also the largest port of America is Laredo, right? It's a land port, and that land port receives close to 10 to 12,000 trucks every single day of the week. So the trading relationship between our two countries and our state, Texas and Mexico, is beyond big, right? I mean, it's huge and will continue to be, because at the end of the day, trade has and businessmen and women have been able to work together to create supply chains that make sense. So in many regards, in the US, sometimes we have a shortage of manpower, and Mexico has that manpower that the United States has. To have reduced costs, many times it's easier or it's cheaper to operate it between these two countries than just having everything in the United States. So logistically, our two, both Texas, Mexico, and the whole of the United States has for the last 30 years really integrated to become a region that is extremely powerful and gives the United States a great edge over most countries in the world.
Well, and having worked for the Immigration Service, I know that we also have the second largest port in tonnage, which is the Port of Houston. And, a lot of people don't realize that, but we have huge trade relations, not just with Mexico, but I didn't realize the scope or the level of the Texas Mexico trade impact until you spoke at the summit. And ignorance on my behalf, just not really knowing and diving into that. My world has always been immigration. Now, what do you see as a future of trade relations between Mexico and Texas evolving? What have been some of the challenges, say, under a previous administration and the administration today?
For many years and more during the previous administration, Texas was ignored, did not basically have a seat on the table, right? And that was a problem, because everything with trade pertaining to Mexico and the United States has to do with Texas, either the crossings or just the amount of trade. And if you don't have Texas at the table, then that is a huge issue. And now with the Trump administration, it's been different. So Texas has a very strong and powerful voice, because trade also has to do with agriculture, right? And this evening in everyone's home, the majority of Americans will be eating something that comes from Mexico. Either could be the avocado, or it could be the lettuce, or it could be just what the pork, or the meat. I mean, there's so many things that come from Mexico, and this agricultural relationship is such an important aspect of the trade relationship that we cannot forget it. So that in itself is critical to Texas, critical to the United States, and the working relationship that businesses have done with their Mexican counterparts is enormous. So not only does Mexico benefit from trading with the U.S., but the other way around as well. So, for example, poultry is sold. American poultry is sold big time in Mexico, as well as some derivatives of corn and other products. So for many of the many involved in the agriculture sector, Mexico is their primary client, and thus that's where our relationship is so fruitful, but has to be constantly monitored, and naturally USMCA has become an agreement that is useful not only to Mexico but also to the United States and naturally Canada. But today it's being revised as it was marked every 6 years, and the Trump administration is looking at what has been done, what hasn't been accomplished through USMCA, and how to make sure that this agreement is set up to succeed in the next few years.
Well, let me pivot into kind of like the border stuff because you mentioned it. I know it's about trade, but in our scope, we haven't seen a level of cartels involved in narco trafficking and child trafficking, and they're involved in everything. And what the American public seems to fail to understand. And you ran as a congressman for District 38, and I'm asking you this because you ran a campaign. What are the dangers that trade could face if that kind of violence continues and they continue to enter this country and pose a significant threat, specifically in the trade market? My questions are things like, how do you prevent businesses? I know that we have to have complete control of visas and who enters and knowing who enters, but in your perspective, and maybe perhaps your opinion as you ran as a congressman, the safety factor of not allowing companies to come in as investors and take over businesses that are vital for money laundering purposes and things of that nature. And I know that takes you to a different angle, but I want to hear your side, your opinion, what you've learned, what you've recommended.
Sure, and it is such an important part of not only trade but our future together. These two countries will always be together, right? Because it's a shared and common border. And at the end of the day, one of the uh, largest problems we have is narco-terrorism, and I am so glad that the current administration declared these cartels terrorist organizations, because that's in reality is what they are. They terrorize not only Americans, but they obviously have terrorized and continue to terrorize Mexicans. And when you consider that 99% of Mexicans are legal abiding citizens and not involved in drugs or the narco trade, you're saying that basically 1% controls in many regards what happens in Mexico, and that is unfortunate. But in terms of trade, as you were pointing out, they've been as of late expanding into not only the regular activities like drug trafficking and human trafficking, but also into extortion and buying businesses that, as you're pointing out, could be doing having operations in the United States. So it's definitely very important to put a stop to it in both countries. And what I see is that every time that Mexico and the United States work in a collaborative fashion, you start to see good results, because at the end of the day, the Mexico U.S. relationship is so interdependent and so intertwined that the effect of stopping a drug lord in Mexico has a direct impact in the United States. For example, as I was campaigning, the Mexican government shot and killed a very important and prominent drug lord by the name of El Mencho. And soon enough, a week later, Luisa, because that started to crumble and just break up. In Houston, they stopped Mencho's ambassador, right? That obviously had a lot to do with human trafficking. So that is just one of the many examples of that direct result of U.S. policies in the making.
Well, and that leads me to my next question because you and I both come from Guadalajara. I lived in Guadalajara, Jalisco for about 4 years prior to my parents coming to the United States. And it's a beautiful country. It's a beautiful place to live. And, you have a lot of Mexicans that vacation in Acapulco and Puerto Vallarta, and that kind of violence really panicked everyone. And with due respect, I know from my past work that on an immigration stance, the cartels are in complete control of everybody that they smuggle in, whether it's a child, whether it's a commodity, whether it's a terrorist, it doesn't matter. It's a business, it's a well organized criminal enterprise from A to Z. And what happens is you see Americans that call, well, here's an example. People calling me saying, I've got my 40th birthday. I want to go to Puerto Vallarta. Should I go? And I'm thinking, why don't you heed the records and the warnings that are being put out by the Department of State? People do some researching. Cartels really are in charge of every aspect of their criminal enterprise. And they don't really care about the human element. They care about making the money, whether it's drugs, whether it's people. The people here don't realize the hold that they have on people that they smuggle into this country, even years after they get here. So that affects a lot of things.
True, and it's no coincidence that Houston is the largest destination for human trafficking in the whole of the United States, right? And that has to do with proximity to Mexico, with all these networks from Mexico operating in Texas and in Houston. And unfortunately, I mean, Houston is a wonderful destination and it's just a great hub for many, many things. But unfortunately, it is also a hub for human trafficking, and putting a stop to it or reducing drastically the number of cases that where Houston and its vicinities are involved is of utmost importance, and that has to do with these narco-terrorist organizations that, as you pointed out, are a very well-oiled machine that runs like businesses, but unfortunately their aim is to destroy and kill, and that's where having a very involved administration like President Trump's administration and drug trafficking and narco-terrorism violence and all of this aspect that most others don't want to get involved in is critical.
Well, and like I said, it's amazing that we have great relations with Mexico. We've seen some things in Mexico that really put it into a different perspective, and the fear of them turning into a completely socialist country, and just what happens at their southern border, et cetera, et cetera. I do want to let our listeners know that we are going to respect the time and take a brief break and go listen to some of our sponsors who obviously support the episodes that we air. So we'll be right back, and I want to dive into some more interesting things with you when we come back, Larry.
Good thing. Thank you.
Listen, we're going to have to cut over to a commercial break real quick because we do have sponsors we want to highlight. Thank you for waiting.
When the stakes are high, clarity matters. In today's fast-moving media environment, misinformation spreads fast, especially around immigration policy, national security, and public safety. That's where Deason Consulting Services steps in. Led by Luisa Deason, former investigative journalist, DHS and ICE subject matter expert, and certified neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, Deason Consulting equips leaders, candidates, law enforcement, and executives with clear posture, confident delivery, and fact-based messaging. From immigration policy education and media response strategy to crisis communication and executive message development, Deason Consulting helps you cut through the rhetoric and speak with authority. Whether you're preparing for a press conference, navigating a complex policy issue, or facing high-pressure media scrutiny, we prepare you to lead. Deason Consulting Services. Strategic communication, informed leadership, measured response. Contact Deason Consulting today and be ready when it matters most. Call today 832-244-2488 or email Luisa@DeasonConsultingServices.com.
Do you have bad credit? Have you tried fixing it yourself and just get frustrated and feel like you will never be able to get to your goals? If credit scores determine what you buy and at what cost, then does it not make more sense to actually hire the big dogs to save you money long term? At Deason's Credit Restoration Services, they have a group of certified and licensed credit attorneys, also versed in consumer protection laws, who do all the work on your behalf to permanently eliminate those negative and derogatory items affecting your credit scores. As we say, there are two things we cannot help you cheat your way out of, and that is death and paying taxes. But restoring your credit will change your life. Please contact Deason's Credit Restoration Services by calling 832-244-2488. Don't wait. Rates are not going down, but your credit scores will go up.
Well, we're back. I am Luisa Deason. I am your host for Frontline Facts. We are correcting the rhetoric, and we're coming back to our guest today. Well, you're listening to Frontline Facts. I am your host, Luisa Deason, and we're back with Larry Rubin, who is an amazing business person in the trade with Texas and Mexico and the U.S. as well. But Larry, you have written a book. Talk a little bit about the book you've written. What
Sure.
is it about? Why did you write it? What pushed you to write that book?
So I've been fascinated by a lot of things, and one of them in particular is just what Texas represents. Obviously, I live in Texas. I've worked in Texas for a number of years. When I was very young, at a very young age, my parents opened up businesses in Houston, and so I've always been enamored by the Texan culture, which in many regards is a little bit different from other states in our country. And not only is it the interesting thing about Texas is that it's such an independent and forward-looking society, but it's becoming focus focus of attention because it's bringing in tons of businesses from around the country and the world. It's already our state is the energy capital of the world, and I could go on and on about how Texas is awesome. So what I wanted to do in this book was basically describe how I see Texas. Explain a little bit because I mean,
Now, let me
Texas.
ask you this. Did you write it in English or in Spanish, or is it in both?
I actually wrote it in English because similar to you, I think in both languages. But I've always read more in English than in Spanish. So I wrote it in English, and it starts explaining what Texas is about and why why the people in Texas think differently from other states, and how Texas is quickly becoming one of the most powerful and economic force in the world. If Texas would be a standalone country, it would represent the eighth in terms of economy, the eighth largest economy in the world. So It's huge, and so my first book talks about Texas, the heritage, the culture, the blend of the Mexican aspect of Texas's history, and how it has become an important force, and how it will become in the decades to come a very, very important player in global trade and global politics, and why it's also such an important part of the United States.
Well, and I look at Houston and I look at Texas, and we have a great majority of refineries here. We're pretty independent in the oil world, but we have the energy corridors. We have so much industry. We look at it from the perspective in my background through my glasses with the perspective of the security. You've got to protect the energy corridors, you've got to protect the water plants, federal buildings, things like that nature. But I so appreciate you bringing that insight with we are a powerhouse of a state and how important we've become in trade and in business. Almost a standalone. If we were
Exactly.
just left alone, we'd survive on our own.
True, true, and that is why it's so important uh to 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 write about it, and assure that people understand why Texas is so important. But one of the reasons Texas has been so successful is because Texas is a state that is not afraid to trade and really work with other countries, right? And mostly Texas worked with Mexico, but at the end of the day, Texas exports and imports from different countries in the world, and the Texan mentality has made Texas really a winning state where different industries just thrive. It's not only agriculture, but it's also in the medical field, the Houston leads, or in the financial industry, Texas leads. It has the second stock exchange in the United States, right? For a particular reason, right? Not only the New York Stock Exchange, but now the Texas Stock Exchange, and in technology, it also leads, and as you mentioned, energy, Texas leads. So it has so many industries where Texas leads not only the country, but is a leader worldwide. That people have to realize just the powerhouse and magnetism that Texas represents.
Well, and as well as I know, we both love politics. I really like helping candidates. I didn't get a chance to work with you. Things had kind of gone a different way. Then I broke my ankle. This time I've broken ribs.
No
I'm
more
almost like
breaking,
a
Luisa.
train
No,
wreck,
no more,
just a
no more,
calamity Jane.
no more breaking nothing in the future, please.
But I really think that there is maybe a future with you rerunning for some other position. I really do believe in that with you and your camp, and I just have a lot of respect for you. I want to ask you to introduce someone that joined us recently because I think that he's not only been an intricate part of your campaign, but I have a lot of respect for him, and he's just such a joy to speak to and to work with.
Definitely.
Let's make that introduction.
Be glad to. So I actually met this gentleman as I was starting my campaign, and after speaking with him and getting to know him, I definitely thought he'd be a great asset to the campaign, and he certainly was, because not only did he bring his network, but also his strategy and his way of looking at things, and understanding where we wanted to go, and what the challenges and opportunities were. So that's when I invited Enrique Huesca to be part of my campaign. He had lived in Houston for over 10 years, had been very successful in the private sector. And then at the same time, with that youth that characterizes him, he has also had a tremendous experience in the public sector. And for me, which was very interesting, is someone that could understand not only Texas, not only Houston, but also the U.S. Mexico relationship, the importance of Mexico in many regards. As you pointed out, security is key, as well as immigration with our southern border with Mexico,
And that's
and
my line of expertise
it's
and helping candidates understand.
exactly. So Enrique Huesca quickly started operating and being an integral part of the campaign and its successes, and that's why we became the fastest growing campaign and in those 75 days of campaigning, which was obviously very little compared to everyone's 1 year, 2 year operation in terms of candidacy. Those 75 days really proved to be just a great opportunity to set up our agenda. But more than that, once the campaign was done with, I definitely thought that Enrique would be a great asset in many of the things that I've been very involved in, and in particular with the American Society and the Mexican American Society, which I had the privilege of being the principal founder a few years ago, and it's a 501(c)(3) that started in Houston, Texas, and naturally today has operations in particularly in Austin and Washington, because it's so important to have relationships and strength in these two capitals. And Enrique did accept becoming the CEO of the American Society, this 83-year-old institution, but also the CEO of the Mexican American Society. So basically, because he has lived in Houston and has lived in Mexico City, that proved to be a great opportunity for everyone. And that's what he's doing. But let me, before I hand it over to him, Luisa, I just love to point out that his experience in the public sector is definitely an asset to both organizations, because he understands politics in the U.S. He understands politics in Mexico, which is quite complex, and importantly enough, he understands the importance of the treasury, of fiscal, of financial issues. And he actually worked for the Secretary of Treasury in Mexico for many years. So that experience and that skill set that he has developed over the years is tremendously beneficial, because he understands the public sector, the private sector, both sectors in Mexico and the United States, and thus is really a truly bicultural individual that adds a lot of value to everything that we do.
I would agree. I would agree. And I have a lot of respect for both of you. Enrique, welcome to Frontline
Thank you
Facts.
so much.
Um,
Thank you.
tell us how you feel. I mean, that's one heck of a position to hold. You're in your element. I can see it when I talk to you. I can see it in your face. I can hear it in your voice. You're so passionate about it. And it was really a pleasure to see both of you and be able to spend some time, some quality time with both of you at the summit in Austin.
Thank you so much, Luisa.
Congratulations on your new post.
Thank you so much, Luisa. Well, after this amazing introduction from my boss, I mean, I am completely lost. But thank you so much. I mean, I had the pleasure since I was 22 years old working with a real tycoon in terms of knowledge, experience. As Larry mentioned, I worked with several sectors of the Treasury of Mexico. I had the privilege to work with almost for 4 years with Jim Davidson, the founder of Silver Lake, and his amazing team. But now I'm working with another tycoon on the U.S.-Mexican relationship, which is, it's like working with Larry Rubin on U.S.-Mexico is like working, with the Google founders. It's like if the guys who are writing the history. I always tell people, well, good for you that you went to a conference to hear someone who was part of the history. Now, Larry's writing history on this relationship, which is fascinating because I love history and I feel I'm part of history. Every time I'm with him in a meeting, it's just like, another famous guy is going to come to ask Larry something, a CEO of a, top investment fund, the CEO of a huge tech company, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of the Economy, the White House.
Are y'all hiring? That's what I'd like to know. No.
Exactly. No, you are. I mean, you are more than needed for this unexperienced guy on the U.S. Mexican side, and working with this boss. Of course, we need We need someone like you in our team. No, I mean, I have been part of, using this relationship when I was in the Mexican government. Then when I moved to the private sector in the US, particularly in Texas. I am a Texan by adoption, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm very grateful with Texas. I mean, it's a super generous, tough state. Tough because you have to deliver, and generous because it always delivers to you if you deliver. And yeah, I mean, I'm very excited. I think it's a crucial historical moment, and I think more than ever we need more Mexican Americans. Like, I mean, I want to be humble in this, but like you two and me, that we understand both sides of the border. It's not just that we have blood or we eat Mexican food. It is more than that. It's that we need really people who understands the complexities of
The
each
culture,
the
the
culture.
traditions, all of
Exactly.
that makes us what we are
Exactly.
today.
Exactly, Lisa. Then
So
very
talk about a
excited.
little bit about the excitement of this gala and this organization. Take me to this nonprofit that has been created and what you do for children, and let's kind of give me an understanding of that. Because Jim Conway and I are so excited to see you both on Thursday night. He said, I just had to promise him I can't dance with him because I've got broken ribs.
Well, let me
But
tell you
it's fortunate
something.
enough that he's the one that introduced me to the two of you. So
Exactly. Well, I mean, and Jim has been an amazing stakeholder on the U.S.-Mexico anti-terrorism policy, which is more than needed now than ever. Well, we have several galas. First of all, the big gala for the American Society of Mexico would be on June 6th in Mexico City, and everyone is invited. You as well. That's
thank
the
you.
big event with the U.S. Embassy in Mexico and all the American community, and it's going to be chaired by Larry and probably, I mean, and the ambassador. But this Thursday, we are also supporting, in parallel to the main gala of the American Society of Mexico, the Mexican American Society is starting working with different foundations to support our communities. And Houston, as Larry says, and you said, I mean, as being the most important port, especially for the North American trade, as Laredo is the import, Houston is the overseas port. We are very committed with how do we improve the quality of our kids. We're going to launch that day a video regarding how much tough could be for certain families in our the greatest Houston area. Kids from different backgrounds, coming from different, cultures, how we are working to, build these ties among these melting pots. And basically through soccer, where in a World Cup year, where Houston, Mexico City are going to be top cities for the World Cup, there's many things to build together. And as you said, culture, sports is one of these opportunities. I mean, we love America, we love football in the US, but soccer would be a natural way to connect different cultures.
Well, and soccer is a global sport.
It is a global sport. And let me tell you something, it's growing and it's booming in the US. Then we are very, very natural aligned to the soccer values, because at the end is like cultural. It unites families from different Hispanic countries, but especially for the Mexican American community is really important. Houston is really helpful for this. And basically, how do we also impact our community through education, training, values? And what is really more important than anything is that we're America is a self-made man, self-made woman culture. And GFI Foundation and the Mexican American Society with the American Society of Mexico partnership, we are completely aligned that we want to get the best of our community everywhere. I mean, Larry said it before. We need more Mexican Americans in boards. We need more Mexican Americans in Congress, in Austin, in Washington, in
You nailed it.
Hampton.
You nailed it. That's exactly
Then-
what we need.
Exactly. And this is one of many initiatives. This Thursday, we're very exciting to come back from DC, where Mr. Rubin is going to be speaking, and join the Houston community, where I definitely think that there's many things to do ahead. As you said, I also hope that he's going to run for office. But before that, we have to deliver and we have to do for our community as much as we can, and also be grateful as for all the things we have got from the community.
Yeah. Well, I think both of you are outstanding. And, you certainly have captivated my heart. I have a lot of respect for both.
You too. You too to us.
You know, one of the things that I learned was diplomacy, if anything, working in an environment with immigration issues that is such a hot topic. I've got haters and I have people that love what I do, but what I think is important is the Mexican American communities need to be informed. They need education. They need all kinds of things that you all are working in collaboration. I think, the work I do, for example, is I know that a lot of times people aren't happy with the delivery of the message, but there's always laws to follow. And my delivery is, well, unfortunately, we don't have much to work with right now, but I really am of the belief that at some point there has to be a change in visa categories to include those laborers that come to this country. I think that is going to open up more doors. It's going to open up more trade. Something like the Braceros program we had years ago for farmers and things of that nature. We really have to take care of those that are the hard workers. And right now, the visas that stand are the ones that are the most easily abused. And they require that you're almost a rocket scientist to get to this country, or someone in a specialized field with very high educational opportunity. And I think that we need to make some changes to that. So I have, my own ideas on that, and I'd love to share those with you all at some point in time.
Yeah, of course. I mean, more than happy, and I think you, with your amazing experience at ICE, working with politicians, and then there's many things coming, and of course for this pipeline and this blueprint that we're working on, it would be great to work with you with your program, but especially, I mean, with your experience, and we're very grateful for that.
Well, I can't thank you both. And I know that Larry is still on, I believe. So, any last words from either one of you? I'll start with you, Larry, and then we'll just close it out with Enrique. And I want to thank you both very, very much for this interview. I know it took us a while to get all scheduled, but it's going to
My
be
apologies. It was my mistake.
no. Listen, there's always a schedule we can schedule, right? So, Larry, any ending thoughts to the conversation today? Anything you want to add that we didn't cover?
Definitely, Luisa. I think it's just very important for everyone to realize that our relationship between Mexico and the United States will continue to expand and to grow. So it's not a relationship that we can divorce, right? It's not a relationship that we can stop. This relationship will continue because our two countries are fully integrated and will continue to be even more integrated. We have the largest population of Americans living in Mexico and the largest population of Mexicans living in the United States. And if we're to thrive as a region, we have to do it together. So definitely we have to make sure that our two countries are aligned, that our politicians in both sides of the border are talking the same language, are looking at the same complexities, and are trying to resolve the same issues. That is where I see President Trump working hard to assure that security, such an important integral part of our communities, is resolved through Mexico, and it makes just total sense. I couldn't be happier when he called out those narco organizations, foreign terrorist organizations, and it was a huge step forward in trying to resolve this huge problem that today is the biggest cause of death of Americans between the ages of 18 and 45 are those fentanyl deaths, right? So that's key. Immigration that you're intrinsically involved is so very important, and that's controlled thanks to the strategies that the current administration has been undergoing. But it all requires Mexico to collaborate. So that collaboration has to be constant and has to be reminded constantly to politicians in both countries. But it's just so important for our well-being, both in Texas, in the United States, and in Mexico. So our two societies will continue to thrive and work together, and that's just part of life. And hopefully, surely enough, our region will become a very because it's already a powerful region, but the most competitive and most important region in the world. So that's what I'd have to add to end the conversation.
And Larry, give us the title of your book and where can people buy it?
So we've been going back and forth with the title. It's not yet for sale, and but really we're very excited. I have a title in mind, but the experts and the advisors are all involved in it. So hopefully my idea will prevail.
Well, good. Well, you've got my backing. Enrique, any last words on the organization, the nonprofit? Where can people find information? Where can people donate here in the United States, specifically here in the Houston area?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would like to talk with this. I mean, we should be very grateful for people with your background, with Larry's experience, but it's time to build a network around these great actors. And there is need of more Mexican American people involved, and we need to get involved, and we need to work together. And it's
Yes.
not enough that someone or some few are working for the community, but we need to start building a network as other communities, as the Cuban American, as the Israeli community in the US, as the Irish in the US, as many as we can think about it. And I'm very grateful to work with you two and with Larry as my chairman. But I mean, we're close asking people that we have to do something. We have to bring back to that JFK speech and what we can do for the Mexican American community in the US. And if for the Gila, I mean, we're going to share. There is a link on our American Society of Mexico or X account, where basically GFI Academy Gala, and you can donate through them. But also, we're going to launch soon our Mexican American Society website, where people will be able to support different initiatives that we are doing among think tanks and foundations, and especially, of course, in our dear Houston area and Texas home state.
Well, that's amazing work. I am so proud of both of you, and I can't wait to see what the future brings and how we can all collaborate. I think we stand on the same side of the street. We need more Mexican American representation in this country, and our communities need to hear from us. And I think that we all three hold the very key positions to be able to make changes that benefit the Mexican American communities in Texas and throughout the United States. I want to thank both of you very, very much for being on the show. To our audience, I can't wait for you all to hear them both speak about their backgrounds and how what an impact they're making to the American and the Mexican economy and what their backgrounds bring to the table. I want to thank both of you, and please, everybody, stay tuned for the next episode of Frontline Facts. I am your host, Luisa Deason, and with that, stay tuned.